You don't have what it takes to run a business, little brother. My name is Brandon Kessler. For 15 years, I'd been the operational backbone of Skyreach Hotels, our family's boutique chain. At 42, I wasn't chasing titles or corner offices. I just made sure our 8 properties across the Northeast ran smoothly, that our staff felt valued, and that our guests kept coming back. Across the desk, my sister Danielle stood with her arms crossed. She'd been president of Skyreach for exactly 11 days, ever since our father decided to step into the chairman role. Her first executive decision was apparently getting rid of me. The board agrees we need fresh perspectives, she continued, watching as I emptied my desk drawer. We've hired a consultant from Marriott to handle your responsibilities. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. The board she mentioned was her, our father, and 2 of her business school friends she'd appointed last week. My sister had always been the face of the company, charming investors, speaking at industry conferences, taking credit for our growth. Meanwhile, I handled supplier negotiations, managed renovations, and built relationships with staff, the unglamorous work that kept us profitable. You'll get 6 months severance, she added, checking her watch. Human Resources has the paperwork ready. I placed my family photos in a box, careful not to let anything crack. The framed picture of our grandfather standing in front of our first hotel in Burlington, the one Danielle had never bothered to display in her office, went in last. Nothing to say, she prodded. Her perfect blazer matched her perfect manicure, not a hair out of place. I just smiled sarcastically. Good luck with the Westbrook renovation. Her eyes flashed with momentary panic. The Westbrook property was our largest, and its renovation was behind schedule and over budget. A problem she'd now have to solve without me. We'll manage just fine, she recovered. My consultant has turned around properties twice that size. I nodded again, picked up my box, and walked out without another word. 15 years of work, dismissed in a 15-minute meeting. What Danielle didn't know, or maybe had forgotten in her rush for control, was that 5 years ago our father had pulled me aside with advice that changed everything. Never put all your eggs in one basket, Brandon, he'd said. The hotel business is in our blood, but land is where the real value lies. It was advice I'd taken to heart, quietly making moves while my sister collected accolades and titles. As I drove away from our corporate office in Boston, I wasn't worried. I was patient. And patience would pay off when the lease renewals came due in just 3 months. I grew up watching my father build Skyreach Hotels from a single struggling property in Burlington, Vermont, into a respected regional chain. While Danielle shadowed him at industry events and investor meetings, I preferred following our maintenance staff through back hallways, learning how the buildings actually functioned. By 16, I could troubleshoot a malfunctioning HVAC system, or negotiate with linen suppliers as well as any adult on payroll. Your sister sees the big picture, my father would say, not unkindly. You see the details that make it possible. It was a balance that worked until it didn't. As our father aged, Danielle's ambition grew. She began bringing in consultants who produced glossy reports suggesting organizational restructuring, and she talked about national expansion, celebrity partnerships, and lifestyle branding. Sometimes I wondered if she actually remembered we were in the business of giving people a comfortable place to sleep. 5 years ago, when our father first mentioned stepping back, I saw the writing on the wall. During a routine review of our finances, I noticed our 3 most profitable properties, Burlington, Portland, and Westbrook, were all operating on land we leased rather than owned. The original owners had been elderly when we signed 99-year leases decades ago, and now their heirs were looking to sell. It's a vulnerability, I told my father over lunch at his favorite steakhouse. If someone buys that land and raises our rates, we're stuck. He nodded slowly. I've been meaning to address that. But with the new property in Providence taking all our capital, I could buy them, I said carefully. Personally. Then lease back to Skyreach at the same rates. Nah, my father studied me over his glasses. That would require significant personal investment, Brandon. I've been saving, I replied simply, and I believe in our company. The next day, he connected me with our bank. 3 months later, I owned the land under our 3 flagship hotels. The company remained the tenant with a 5-year preferential lease agreement that would need renewal. "Does Danielle know about this arrangement?" my father had asked as we signed the papers. "It's all in the corporate documents," I said, "but she doesn't read those unless she has to." He chuckled. "Your sister sees the forest, you see the trees. Someday she'll understand how important that is." Now, driving home from my last day at Skyreach, I wondered if that day had finally arrived. I hadn't missed the subtle changes over the past year, Danielle excluding me from strategic meetings, questioning my budget requests, reassigning my best staff. The groundwork for my removal had been laid long before today's conversation. The morning after being fired, I woke at the same time as always, 5:30 a.m. For 15 years, I'd started my day reviewing overnight reports from our properties, addressing any issues before they could escalate. Today, my phone remained silent. No emergencies, no fires to put out, just silence. I made coffee and sat on my back porch overlooking Boston Harbor. The container ships moved silently across the water, constant and deliberate. I'd always admired their efficiency. No wasted movement, no need for recognition, just the steady business of carrying value from one place to another. My phone buzzed. A text from Miguel, our head of maintenance at the Westbrook property. "Heard what happened. Their loss, man. New consultant already making changes, cutting corners on the renovation. Not good." I typed back a simple thanks but didn't offer advice. Not my problem anymore. Another message came through, this one from our father. "Breakfast at Rosie's? 8 a.m. Rosie's was a diner 2 blocks from our first corporate office. We hadn't eaten there together in years. When I arrived, he was already in a corner booth, looking older than I remembered. He nodded as I sat down. "She told me after the fact," he said without preamble. "I would have handled it differently." "But you didn't stop it," I observed. "Not a question." He sighed, stirring his coffee. "Danielle thinks Skyreach needs to evolve, become more corporate, less family-style management. And you agree?" "I think..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "That your sister has a vision for growth that the board finds compelling." The waitress brought our usual orders without asking, black coffee and blueberry pancakes for him, eggs and toast for me. Some things hadn't changed. "The land," he said after she left. "Danielle doesn't fully understand the lease arrangements." I cut my eggs precisely. "The corporate documents explain everything." "You know she doesn't read the fine print." He gave me a pointed look. "The renewal comes up soon." 3 months, I confirmed. "I've already spoken with my lawyer about terms." My father set down his fork. "What are you planning, Brandon?" The question hung between us. In that moment, I realized I'd been expecting this conversation for years, preparing for it even. The quiet, reliable son finally having leverage over the favored daughter. I'd imagined satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. "Market rate leases," I said finally. "Nothing more, nothing less." He nodded slowly. "That will significantly impact our operating costs." "Yes." I met his gaze. "It will." We finished our breakfast in silence. As we stepped outside, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your sister sees business as a game to win," he said. "You've always seen it as a foundation to build on. Don't forget that difference." I watched him walk away, his shoulders slightly stooped with age. For the first time, I saw clearly what had been in front of me all along. This wasn't just about Danielle underestimating me. It was about our father enabling a rift that had been growing for decades. I returned home and opened my home office. On the wall hung the original plans for our Burlington hotel, framed when I purchased the land beneath it. Time to focus on foundations. 2 weeks after my dismissal, Danielle finally called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her carefully measured message. "Brandon, we need to discuss the transition. Some files are missing. Call me back." No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd fired her brother after 15 years of service. Just business as usual. I deleted the message and spent the afternoon meeting with an old college friend who'd become a commercial real estate developer. The next day, she appeared at my condo. When I opened the door, she brushed past me into the living room. "You're ignoring me," she said. "I'm respecting your decision to remove me from company business." I remained standing while she sat uninvited on my couch. "What files are you missing?" "Vendor contracts, maintenance schedules, the complete renovation plans for Westbrook." She frowned. "And financial documents. There's a gap in our property lease information." "Everything is in the shared drive," I replied. "Organized by property and department, just like always." "Well, your organization system isn't exactly intuitive." She crossed her legs, her designer heel bouncing with irritation. "And your replacement needs context." I poured myself a coffee without offering her one. "My replacement is a hospitality consultant who's turned around properties twice our size. I'm sure he can figure out a filing system." Her eyes narrowed at hearing her own words thrown back at her. "This isn't helpful, Brandon. The company needs—" "I don't work for the company anymore," I interrupted. "Remember?" Danielle stood, smoothing her skirt. "Fine. I'll have legal request the documents formally." "Do what you need to do," I said, walking toward the door. Our conversation was over. A week later, a certified letter arrived from Skyreach's lawyer requesting all documents pertaining to company operations. I forwarded it to my own attorney, who responded with a detailed list of everything already available on company servers, and a polite reminder that personal notes and materials were my property. Meanwhile, I started receiving calls from Skyreach employees. The new consultant was implementing efficiency measures, cutting staff hours, deferring maintenance, replacing longtime suppliers with cheaper alternatives. Morale was plummeting. Guests were noticing. Rather than satisfaction, I felt a strange hollowness. These were people I'd worked with for years, some I'd personally hired. Their livelihoods were being threatened by my sister's vision and my absence. Then came the email from our property insurance provider, requesting clarification on recent ownership changes affecting 3 key properties. Apparently, Danielle had attempted to update the insurance policies and encountered the truth. The company didn't own the land under our most profitable hotels. I did. I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding. The next morning, my father called. "Did you know?" His voice was tight. "That Danielle doesn't read legal documents?" "Yes," a heavy sigh. "She's called an emergency board meeting. Says you've hidden critical information from the company." "Nothing was hidden," I replied evenly. "Every lease agreement is properly documented. The company has been paying me rent for 5 years." "Paying you?" He sounded genuinely confused. "The accounting shows payments to BK Holdings. She thought that was a property management company." BK Holdings. Brandon Kessler Holdings. My sister had been signing off on financial statements for years without realizing she was approving payments to her own brother. "The board meeting is tomorrow," my father continued. "You should be there." "I'm not on the board anymore," I reminded him. "Brandon." His voice softened. "This is still our family business." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, turning my grandfather's old hotel key between my fingers. The same key that opened the first property my father had transformed into Skyreach. Family business indeed. But families were supposed to look out for each other. My lawyer called an hour later. "Skyreach's attorneys are requesting information about lease renewals. How do you want to proceed?" I made my decision. Send them the new terms, market rate, no special considerations. The Westbrook Hotel stood 8 stories tall on the corner of Ocean Avenue, its large windows reflecting the morning light off Casco Bay. I'd personally overseen its renovation from a tired motor lodge into one of our most distinctive properties. Now I sat in my car across the street, watching guests stream through its doors, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding behind the scenes. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my lawyer. "They've received the new lease terms. Expecting a response today." I'd known the numbers would shock them. The below-market rates I'd offered 5 years ago had saved Skyreach nearly $2 million annually across the 3 properties. The new terms would eliminate that advantage entirely. As I watched, a familiar silver Mercedes pulled into the reserved parking spot near the entrance. Danielle. She wasn't supposed to be in Portland today. I sank lower in my seat as she strode into the building, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing emphatically. Curiosity got the better of me. I called Miguel. "Your sister's on the warpath," he answered without greeting. "Emergency inspection. Brought the new consultant too." "What are they looking for?" "Property documents, blueprints. Said something about structural assessment." He lowered his voice. "Between us, I think they're trying to figure out if they can challenge your ownership claim." After thanking him, I drove to the Portland Public Records office. Using my laptop, I pulled up the original deed transfers, property surveys, and lease agreements, all perfectly legal, all properly filed, as expected. What I didn't expect was what I found in the adjacent county records. A permit application filed 2 years ago by Danielle, using her married name. A development permit for a large-scale commercial property on undeveloped oceanfront land, just outside Portland city limits. I checked the business entity, Kessler Vision LLC, not Skyreach, a separate company entirely with my sister as the sole proprietor. Further digging revealed similar permits in Burlington and near our Westbrook property, all filed by the same LLC, all for competing hotel developments. The realization hit like a physical blow. While I'd been faithfully managing our family's hotels, Danielle had been planning to launch her own competing chain. She hadn't fired me because she thought I was incompetent. She'd fired me because I was in the way of her true ambitions. I called Patricia immediately. "I need you to look into a company called Kessler Vision LLC." 2 days later, we had the full picture. Danielle had been courting investors for her own luxury hotel brand for nearly 3 years. Her business plan, which Patricia had obtained through a contact, explicitly mentioned leveraging expertise and clientele developed at Skyreach and targeting the same markets where our most successful properties operated. The morning of the emergency board meeting, I received a call from an unexpected source, Vincent Ross, one of Danielle's business school friends who sat on our board. "I've seen the lease renewal terms," he said without preamble, "and I've heard rumors about Kessler Vision." "Not just rumors," I replied. A long pause. "I respected your father. That's why I joined this board." Another pause. "Danielle assured us you were stepping away voluntarily, that you wanted to explore other opportunities." "Did she mention her own other opportunities?" A heavy sigh. "No, that's why I'm calling." I heard papers shuffling. "The board meeting is at 2. I think you should know that Danielle is going to propose Skyreach sell the Westbrook, Burlington, and Portland properties. Says the lease terms make them unprofitable." The final piece clicked into place. She wanted Skyreach to sell the hotels so her new company could acquire them at distressed prices. The buildings, not the land, creating a complicated situation where her new venture would become my tenant. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I didn't tell you anything," Vincent replied, and hung up. I sat very still, letting cold rage wash through me. This wasn't just business anymore. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. Instead of attending the board meeting, I flew to New York to meet with Julian Hayes, CEO of Commonwealth Hotels. We'd crossed paths at industry events over the years, and he'd once attempted to recruit me. At the time, I'd declined out of loyalty to my family's business. Now that loyalty felt misplaced. "Interesting timing," Julian remarked as we settled in his corner office overlooking Central Park. "I heard Skyreach is considering divesting some properties." News traveled fast in the hospitality world. 3 properties, I confirmed. Their most profitable ones. He leaned forward. "And you happen to own the land beneath them?" I nodded. A situation my sister failed to appreciate until recently. Julian's smile was all business. "So, what exactly are you proposing, Brandon?" "A partnership. Commonwealth acquires the buildings when Skyreach sells. I maintain ownership of the land but offer preferential lease terms to you." I slid a folder across his desk. Detailed financials, current operations, and my proposal. While Julian reviewed the documents, I gazed out at the park. 15 years at Skyreach, and I'd never had an office with a view like this. Danielle had insisted the best spaces were needed for client meetings and her own office. Always the face of the company, always front and center. These properties fit our expansion strategy, Julian said finally. But I'm curious. Why not simply raise the rent and force your sister to keep operating them? You'd make more money. Because she's already planning to launch a competing hotel chain, I explained. One that would directly target Skyreach's market. His eyebrows rose. While still running Skyreach, that's ambitious. That's one word for it. I kept my voice neutral. I believe her plan was to devalue these properties, have Skyreach sell them, then acquire them through her new venture at reduced prices. With you as her landlord, Julian chuckled. Awkward. I prefer to choose my business partners more carefully. I met his gaze directly. Commonwealth has a reputation for retaining staff during acquisitions. That matters to me. Julian studied me for a long moment. Family businesses are complicated, he said finally. This isn't about family anymore, I replied. It's about doing the right thing for the people who built these hotels. 2 days later, Commonwealth's legal team began drafting acquisition proposals. Meanwhile, I contacted Miguel and other key staff members at the 3 properties, discreetly informing them of potential changes and assuring them their positions would be secure. The news broke faster than expected. A hospitality industry blog published a piece speculating about Skyreach's financial troubles and Commonwealth's interest in their prime locations. Danielle's response was immediate. A company-wide email denying any plans to sell properties and reaffirming Skyreach's strong market position. Then my father called, his voice weary. The board rejected her proposal to sell. Good, I said simply. She's furious. Says you're undermining the company. He paused. She found out about your meetings with Commonwealth. I remained silent. Brandon, he sighed. What are you trying to accomplish here? The question hung between us, heavier than he knew. What was I trying to accomplish? Revenge? Justice? Or something more fundamental? A reckoning long overdue? I'm protecting what I built, I answered finally. The same way you taught me. 3 weeks later, Skyreach's stock dropped 12% following a quarterly report showing declining revenue and increasing costs. The same day, I received a formal request from the board, minus Danielle, for a meeting to discuss strategic alternatives for challenged properties. My lawyer and Julian's team prepared for the meeting meticulously. When the day came, I walked into Skyreach's conference room for the first time since my dismissal. Danielle sat at the head of the table, face tight with barely controlled anger. Our father sat to her right, looking every bit his 70 years. Board members filled the remaining seats, their expressions carefully neutral. I took my place at the opposite end, opened my portfolio, and waited for them to make the first move. Let's be clear about what's happening here, Danielle began, her voice clipped. My brother is attempting a hostile takeover of the company our father built. Incorrect, I replied calmly. I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner. Commonwealth Hotels is interested in acquiring buildings Skyreach no longer wishes to maintain, given the new lease terms. Vincent Ross cleared his throat. The board never approved selling those properties. The board was presented with misleading information, I countered, sliding folders to each member. These documents show that while serving as president of Skyreach, Danielle was simultaneously developing a competing hotel chain, targeting the same markets. The room went silent. My father's face drained of color as he opened his folder. This is absurd, Danielle sputtered. Kessler Vision is a consulting firm, not a hotel development company with permit applications in 3 cities where Skyreach operates, I finished for her, with a business plan explicitly stating its intention to leverage expertise and clientele developed at Skyreach. Our father turned to her, betrayal evident in his expression. Is this true? Her silence was answer enough. I continued. Commonwealth's offer exceeds market value for the properties. It includes guarantees to retain all current staff and honor existing customer commitments. I paused. Something Danielle's venture had no intention of doing. You've been planning this for years, she accused, voice shaking. Buying the land, waiting to spring your trap. No, I corrected. I bought the land to protect our family business. You're the one who decided I wasn't part of that family anymore. The board voted unanimously to accept Commonwealth's offer, with one abstention, our father, who sat motionless throughout the proceedings. As the meeting concluded, Danielle stormed out without a word. Vincent approached me afterward. The board will be requesting Danielle's resignation tomorrow, he said quietly. We'll need interim leadership while we restructure. I shook my head. That won't be me. I've made other arrangements. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the former Westbrook Hotel, now the flagship of Commonwealth's Northeast Collection. The property had been renamed the Harbor View, but much remained unchanged. Miguel still ran maintenance, most of the staff had stayed on, and guests still enjoyed the same ocean views that had made it special. Julian joined me, handing over a quarterly report. Revenue up 17% from last year. You were right about the local market potential. As consulting director for Commonwealth's regional properties, I worked primarily behind the scenes, negotiating with suppliers, mentoring staff, ensuring quality standards. No corner office, no power suits, no board politics. Just the work itself, which was all I'd ever wanted. Have you seen your father? Julian asked carefully. I nodded. Monthly dinners. He's adjusting to retirement. After the takeover, he'd stepped down from Skyreach entirely. The company still operated 5 properties, though none were performing as well as the ones Commonwealth had acquired. And your sister? Kessler Vision filed for bankruptcy protection last month. I said it without satisfaction or regret. Turns out hotel development requires more than ambition and a business degree. We stood in comfortable silence, watching boats navigate the harbor. Eventually, Julian left for another meeting, and I remained alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Dinner tonight? Bringing the grandkids. I smiled and confirmed. My niece and nephew weren't responsible for their mother's actions, and I'd made sure my relationship with them remained intact throughout the corporate turmoil. As the sun began to set, I took one last look at the property. Not just the building, but the land beneath it. The foundation that made everything else possible. In the end, that's what Danielle had never understood. Success wasn't about who sat in the biggest office or who had the fanciest title. It was about creating something solid enough to weather any storm. I turned away from the view and headed downstairs. Time to prepare for dinner with family, the parts worth keeping anyway.